Imagine stepping into 1914, a year when the United States stood on the brink of transformation, buzzing with the energy of progress and the shadows of distant storms. Under President Woodrow Wilson, the nation was in the heart of the progressive era, pushing for reforms that promised a fairer society and a stronger economy. Factories hummed, immigrants poured in through Ellis Island, and the American dream felt within reach for millions. The year began with a bang in the world of industry. On January 5th, Henry Ford unveiled his revolutionary moving assembly line at his Highland Park plant in Michigan, churning out Model T automobiles at a pace never seen before. This innovation slashed production time from 12 hours to just 90 minutes per car, making the affordable vehicle accessible to the average family. But Ford did not stop there. Days later, on January 6th, he announced a staggering $5 a day wage for workers, more than double the going rate, provided they met strict efficiency standards and lived respectable lives off the factory floor. This move not only boosted productivity, but sparked a wave of labor reforms, drawing workers from across the country and even abroad, fueling America's industrial might. As winter turned to spring, the United States turned its gaze southward, entangled in the chaos of the Mexican Revolution. Tensions had been simmering since the overthrow of President Francisco Madero in 1913, and by April, a minor incident in the port of Tampico escalated dramatically. On April 9th, US sailors from the gunboat Dolphin were briefly arrested by Mexican forces loyal to General Victoriano Huerta, Mexico's controversial leader. Wilson refused to recognize Huerta's regime, viewing it as illegitimate. Demands for an apology went unmet, and on April 21st, American Marines stormed the port of Veracruz, a vital gateway for German arms shipments to Huerta. The occupation lasted 7 months, costing over 100 lives on both sides and straining relations with Latin America. It marked a bold assertion of US influence in the hemisphere, under the banner of moral diplomacy, but it also sowed seeds of resentment that would echo for decades. Amid these foreign entanglements, domestic strife revealed the growing pains of a booming nation. In the coal fields of southern Colorado, the Ludlow massacre unfolded on April 20th, a tragic clash during a bitter strike by miners against the Rockefeller-owned Colorado Fuel and Iron Company. Tent colonies housing strikers and their families were set ablaze by National Guard troops and company guards, killing 21 people, including women and children. The horror gripped the nation, igniting debates on labor rights and corporate power, and paving the way for stronger union protections in the years ahead. Yet 1914 was not all conflict. It sparkled with cultural milestones that captured the American spirit. February saw the birth of Hollywood's golden age. On February 12th, Cecil B. DeMille is The Squaw Man, premiered as the first feature-length film shot in the fledgling California movie colony, laying the foundation for an industry that would soon dominate global entertainment. Just days earlier, on February 7th, Charlie Chaplin shuffled onto screens in Kid Auto Races at Venice, debuting his iconic tramp character, a bumbling everyman whose humor would unite audiences worldwide. And on May 9th, President Wilson signed a congressional resolution establishing Mother's Day as a national holiday, a nod to the tireless women shaping American homes and hearts. But beneath this veneer of optimism, a thunderclap from Europe was about to shatter the peace. On June 28th, in the bustling streets of Sarajevo, Bosnia, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie were assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a young Bosnian Serb nationalist tied to the Black Hand Group. The shot that killed the Archduke did not just end 2 lives. It ignited a powder keg of alliances and rivalries that had simmered for decades. News raced across the Atlantic via telegraph, stunning Americans who had viewed Europe as a distant, stable continent. The crisis unfolded with terrifying speed. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issued a harsh ultimatum to Serbia on July 23rd, demanding suppression of anti-Austrian activities. Serbia's partial refusal led to war declarations. Austria-Hungary mobilized against Serbia on July 28th, pulling in Russia as Serbia's protector. Germany declared war on Russia on August 1st and on France on August 3rd, then marched through neutral Belgium on August 4th, prompting Britain to enter the fray. By month's end, the great powers were locked in a cataclysmic struggle. The Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and later the Ottoman Empire against the allies of France, Britain, Russia, and eventually Japan and Italy. What began as a regional spat engulfed the globe, claiming millions of lives in the trenches that would define a generation. From the White House, President Wilson watched with grave concern. On August 4th, as German troops violated Belgian neutrality, he proclaimed US strict neutrality in thought and deed, urging Americans to be impartial in the conflict. This stance resonated with a nation wary of foreign wars, its population a mosaic of European immigrants loyal to both sides. Yet, neutrality proved a delicate balance. American banks extended loans to the Allies, and factories ramped up production of munitions and supplies, turning the war into an economic windfall. Exports to Britain and France soared, injecting billions into the US economy and pulling the nation from a pre-war recession. August brought a triumph closer to home that symbolized America's rising global stature. On August 15th, after a decade of Herculean engineering under Theodore Roosevelt's vision, the Panama Canal officially opened to maritime traffic. The first ship, the SS Ancon, steamed through the 48-mile waterway, linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and slashing shipping times around South America. For the United States, it was more than infrastructure. It was a strategic artery for trade and naval power, reinforcing the Monroe Doctrine and projecting influence across both oceans. As autumn deepened, Washington pushed forward with domestic reforms to curb the excesses of big business. On September 26th, the Federal Trade Commission was established to investigate unfair trade practices, a key tool in Wilson's trust-busting arsenal. Just weeks later, on October 15th, Congress passed the Clayton Antitrust Act, outlawing price discrimination and interlocking directorates that stifled competition, while exempting labor unions from antitrust laws, a victory for organized workers. These legislative wins underscored a year of contrast, innovation and strife, isolation and interconnection. Immigration debates raged too. In February, Congress approved the Burnett Immigration Act, tightening restrictions on newcomers, reflecting anxieties over cultural shifts amid the European exodus fleeing war. Sports offered respite. On July 11th, a lanky 19-year-old named Babe Ruth debuted for the Boston Red Sox, pitching a victory that hinted at his legendary future. By December, as snow blanketed the battlefields of Europe in a fragile Christmas truce, Americans pondered a world forever altered. The war had upended global trade routes, spiked food prices, and flooded US ports with refugees, challenging the illusion of isolation. It shattered the century-long stability that had allowed the United States to focus inward, forcing a reckoning with its role on the world stage. 1914 was the hinge of history. The end of the old order and the dawn of America is reluctant emergence as a superpower. In the shadow of those summer guns, the United States glimpsed its destiny, a beacon of democracy, entangled in the fates of nations far beyond its shores.